3 seconds. That's all it took to turn a quiet morning into a global reckoning. By the time the security guard reached him, Nathaniel Cole already knew the airline wouldn't survive what came next. 3 seconds. That's all it took to turn a routine business trip into a global storm. 3 seconds for eyes to narrow, for suspicion to harden, for the weight of history to crash down in a place where Nathaniel Cole should have been invisible, just another man traveling on business. But Nathaniel Cole was never invisible, not anymore. And in this terminal, under the sharp fluorescent lights and the sterile scent of disinfectant, his very presence carried the power to unsettle. The automatic doors hissed open as Nathaniel stepped into the concourse, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. A leather carry-on, sleek and understated, rolled behind him with quiet precision. His Tom Ford suit was cut to perfection, each seam tailored to his athletic frame, his platinum cufflinks glinting under the light. He looked like he belonged anywhere. He looked like he owned the air around him. Yet he knew before he reached the counter that belonging was never the question. It was whether those guarding the gates believed he belonged. The first-class check-in line was empty. Nathaniel approached with the measured ease of a man accustomed to moving through rarefied spaces, his platinum frequent flyer card sliding across the counter along with his identification. Erica, the younger of the two agents, offered him a polite smile before quickly deferring to her colleague, Sandra McKee. Sandra's eyes flicked down to the ID, then back up, her lips tightening into a smile that was anything but welcoming. She lingered on the name, her mouth shaping it as though testing the sound. "Mr. Cole," she said, stretching the syllables, her tone skeptical. Her fingers tapped the keyboard with exaggerated force, as though the system itself might reveal a hidden flaw in his identity. Nathaniel stood patiently, expression neutral, gaze steady. He had long ago mastered the art of stillness in moments like these. He knew the rhythm, the pause before the question, the forced politeness, the suspicion cloaked as procedure. "Business or pleasure?" Sandra asked finally, her eyes not leaving the screen. "Business," Nathaniel replied evenly. "I'm sure," she muttered, just loud enough for Erica to hear, and the young agent's lips pressed together in discomfort. Sandra leaned slightly closer to her colleague, her whisper sharp but not sharp enough to escape Nathaniel's ear. "That startup guy. Probably just lucked into money." Erica glanced at Nathaniel quickly, then back at her keyboard, cheeks coloring. Nathaniel said nothing. He didn't need to. The silence itself became its own kind of power. Sandra printed his boarding pass with visible reluctance, handing it over with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "First-class passengers may proceed to the premium lounge," she said. The word passengers carried the faintest edge, like a test she was certain he would fail. He accepted the pass without comment, nodded once, and turned toward the lounge. The weight of eyes followed him, some curious, some dismissive, others wary. He felt the shift, the low hum of judgment that always seemed to follow him into spaces marked exclusive. He'd been here too many times before. At the lounge entrance, a young blonde agent named Ryan looked relieved to see him. "Good morning, sir. May I see your boarding pass?" His smile was genuine, his tone professional. For a brief second, Nathaniel thought this would be uneventful. Then Sandra appeared again, slightly out of breath, as though she had hurried to intercept him. "I'll handle this one," she said briskly, brushing past Ryan without a glance. Nathaniel handed over his documents once more. Sandra inspected them with theatrical scrutiny, flipping the boarding pass, turning his ID at different angles, frowning at the system screen. Travelers nearby slowed their steps, sensing tension. "This ticket," she said finally, her voice loud enough for others to hear, "seems unusual. These seats are very expensive." Nathaniel's brow lifted slightly. "Unusual? How so?" "Well, we need to make sure passengers are in their proper place." Her smile was tight, her eyes narrowing. "Did you find this boarding pass, sir? Or perhaps it was purchased for you by an employer?" The implication hung in the air like a slap. A man in khakis nearby chuckled loud enough to join the moment. "Maybe he's lost. Coaches that way," he said, pointing down the terminal. Laughter followed from someone else. Sandra didn't correct him. If anything, her posture grew straighter, her confidence swelling in the presence of an audience. Nathaniel reached slowly into his wallet, his movements deliberate, controlled. He withdrew a black American Express Centurion card, placing it lightly on the counter between them. The card gleamed under the overhead lights, a symbol so exclusive that most people never see one in person. "Will this help verify my identity?" His voice was calm, even, almost gentle, but there was steel beneath it. For a flicker of a second, Sandra faltered. Her eyes widened before she masked it with renewed disdain. "Anyone would have that," she said sharply. Her hand reached for the phone. "Security will need to verify. We can't be too careful these days. And with those words, the choice was made, the humiliation complete. Nathaniel didn't argue, didn't raise his voice, didn't plead. He stepped back, hands loosely clasped behind his back, posture perfect. His face was unreadable, but in his silence was a quiet declaration. This isn't over. Phones tilted subtly in the crowd. Passengers recorded the scene. Erica's wide, troubled eyes lingered on Nathaniel as he was escorted away by security. She looked as if she wanted to say something but couldn't. The marble floor gleamed as Nathaniel walked toward the small security office, flanked on either side. He moved not like a man defeated, but like one marking time. Every step carried dignity, every breath controlled. For the others in that terminal, it was just another incident. Another black man removed, another whispered justification of procedure. But for Nathaniel Cole, this was the spark, the insult that would set fire to an empire. The security office was too quiet. A sterile little room with white walls, a steel desk, and the faint hum of a flickering fluorescent light. Nathaniel stood still as the door clicked shut behind him. The guard on duty gestured toward a chair. "Please have a seat, sir." Nathaniel didn't move. He simply handed over his ID and boarding pass again, the motion smooth, almost detached. His silence unsettled the room more than any argument could have. The supervisor entered, tall, broad-shouldered, his salt and pepper hair cropped short, the kind of man who looked like he had spent a lifetime in uniform. His nameplate read, V. Grant. His voice was low and steady, but not unkind. "What seems to be the issue?" "Passenger's documentation looks suspicious." Sandra's voice crackled over the phone line, filling the room. Grant glanced at the documents, then back at Nathaniel. He scanned the boarding pass, cross-checked the system. Everything matched. "Everything appears to be in order," he said after a beat. Nathaniel held his gaze. Sandra's voice came again, sharp with insistence. "Just to be safe, I want him removed from the lounge area. We can't be too careful these days." Grant hesitated, visibly uncomfortable. He'd been in this job long enough to see patterns. The same faces stopped, the same people pulled aside, the same excuses dressed up as random. "Sir," he said finally, returning Nathaniel's documents. "You're free to go. My apologies for the inconvenience." Nathaniel took the boarding pass, his face unreadable, but his stillness held weight. "Is it an inconvenience?" he asked quietly. "Or a pattern?" Grant said nothing. His silence was answer enough. When Nathaniel stepped back into the terminal, his phone was already in his hand. The crowd from earlier had dispersed, but a few eyes still lingered on him. One pair of eyes, wide, anxious, belonged to Erica, who stood just beyond the lounge entrance, hands gripping the podium. Nathaniel didn't break stride as he spoke softly into the phone. "This is Cole, Protocol Raven, full spectrum engagement, observation mode." "Confirmed," came Leah Okoro's voice, crisp and professional. In a parking lot across from the airport, a black SUV idling with tinted windows came to life. Two figures inside opened. Secure laptops, their screens flooding with green data as digital watchdogs began crawling through Regalis Airways systems. Across the country, in a quiet office at Cole Dynamics' headquarters, alerts lit up a wall of monitors as cybersecurity analysts began logging every transaction, every network vulnerability, every piece of employee chatter flagged by the system. This wasn't anger, this was precision. Nathaniel walked to his gate, calm as ever, but beneath the surface his mind was a storm. He had spent a lifetime holding his composure, teaching himself that restraint was survival. But this moment, this quiet humiliation, had triggered something else. Not rage, but resolve. As he sat in the first-class waiting area, his phone buzzed with incoming data. Leah's voice again, this time lower, almost conspiratorial. Initial intel on Regalis is ugly. Offshore accounts, buried harassment settlements, and something else. Their flight safety records are questionable. We're talking cover-ups. Nathaniel's eyes stayed fixed on the tarmac outside. "Good," he said softly. "Keep digging. Don't disrupt anything yet. Just watch. I want to see how they respond when they think they've won." In another part of the airport, Erica sat in the break room, her hands shaking as she scrolled through her phone. The video of Nathaniel being escorted away was already on social media. Comments were pouring in. "Classic case of flying while black. Another day, another humiliation. This man is worth billions and still gets treated like this." Her coworker leaned against the counter whispering, "You saw how she went after him, right? That wasn't about a ticket." Erica swallowed hard. "No," she admitted, "it wasn't." Back in the waiting area, Nathaniel's boarding call was announced. He rose smoothly, walked past the same lounge where Sandra had intercepted him, and met her eyes briefly as he passed. She flinched. He didn't break stride. On board, Nathaniel took his seat, opened his leather portfolio, and began reviewing reports streaming in from his team in real time. Passenger complaints buried, internal HR memos shielding problem employees. A pattern, exactly the kind he had spent his life building systems to predict. Leah's voice came through again, calm but electric with focus. "Shall we escalate?" Nathaniel closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the hum of the engines beneath his feet. This wasn't about Sandra anymore. This was about every locked door he had been forced to knock on twice, every assumption that he didn't belong, every system designed to push men like him back into their place. "Not yet," he said finally. "Let them think they're safe. Let them think I'm gone. Then we take everything." The engines roared to life. The plane lifted off into the night sky. Somewhere far below, the first ripples of Protocol Raven were already moving through Regalis Airways network, silent and unstoppable. The war had begun. The hum of the aircraft engines was still fading from Nathaniel's mind when his phone buzzed again, this time with a secure video call request. Leah's face appeared, her expression calm but focused, the kind of calm that came before a storm. "We've mapped their internal network," she reported, her voice crisp. "Their cybersecurity is outdated, shockingly so. The skeletons are practically sitting on the surface. We've also flagged something you're going to want to see." She tapped her tablet. A series of internal HR complaints appeared on Nathaniel's screen. Passenger names, dates, keywords, profiling, targeting, humiliating behavior. McKee's name appears 12 times in the last 2 years, Leah continued. Most of the complaints came from passengers of color. Every single one was marked as unsubstantiated and closed without further investigation. Nathaniel's expression didn't change, but his eyes darkened slightly, his jaw setting with subtle finality. "Document everything," he said. "Every name, every date, every decision-maker who signed off." As the feed went dark, Nathaniel sat back in his seat, fingers steepled under his chin. He had spent a lifetime being told to take the high road, to let things go, to not rock the boat. Tonight, he was done with the high road. This wasn't a boat to rock. This was an empire to sink and rebuild from scratch. Across the country, at the Regalis Airways Employee Lounge, Sandra McKee held court. A circle of gate agents clustered around her as she told and retold the story of how she had protected the integrity of the lounge that morning. "He just looks suspicious," she said, her voice smug. "Those people always think money entitles them to special treatment. Well, not on my watch." Erica sat quietly in the corner, clutching her paper cup of coffee so tightly it threatened to buckle. She wanted to speak, to say he was polite, calm, respectful. You humiliated him for no reason, but the words caught in her throat. The room felt charged, eyes darting between Sandra and Erica as if daring her to speak. "You should have seen the look on his face," Sandra went on, laughing. "Thought that fancy suit would save him." Erica's stomach turned. She couldn't sit there any longer. She stood abruptly, muttered something about her shift ending, and walked out. Her phone buzzed in her pocket as she reached the staff parking lot. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Ms. Rodriguez?" The voice was female, steady, with a tone that was somehow both formal and reassuring. "Yes. Who is this?" "My name is Leah Okoro. I work with Mr. Nathaniel Cole." Erica froze. Is he okay?" "He's fine," Leah replied. "More than fine. But I believe you witnessed what happened today." Erica glanced around the empty parking lot, heart hammering. I did. "There may come a time very soon when you'll have to decide whether to stay silent or tell the truth," Leah said. "And I need you to know this. You will not stand alone if you choose to speak." Erica swallowed hard. "I don't want to lose my job." "You may lose it either way," Leah said gently, "but you have a chance to change something much bigger than your job. Think about it." The line clicked off, leaving Erica staring at her phone, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. Back at Regalis Airways headquarters in Atlanta, a different kind of tension was building. In the IT operations center, 3 engineers stood over a terminal, watching in disbelief as key flight data blinked in and out of existence. "It's like the system is fighting itself," one muttered. "Could it be a cyber attack?" asked the director, his tie loosened, sweat beading on his forehead. "No obvious breach point," the engineer said, "but whoever did this, they know our systems better than we do." In a corner of the same room, a junior analyst pulled up a server log and froze. There, buried deep in the code, was a name she had only ever heard in passing. Engage Cole Dynamics. Meanwhile, Nathaniel sat in the quiet of his San Francisco suite, lights off, watching the skyline shimmer in the distance. His phone buzzed again with a single notification from Leah. Phase 1 complete. In airports across the country, Regalis passengers began to feel the first ripple effects. Sudden cancellations, overbooked flights, payment systems double charging elite customers. VIP travelers took to Twitter, furious. Screenshots of error messages flooded Instagram stories. And deep within Regalis Airways' private Slack channels, employees started whispering, "Whoever we messed with the wrong person." Charles Whitmore's office smelled of expensive bourbon and quiet panic. The CEO of Regalis Airways stood in front of the wall-mounted television, his tie loosened, his face pale as live coverage from CNN replayed shaky cell phone footage of Nathaniel Cole being escorted out of the first-class lounge. And this video, already viewed over 3 million times, shows billionaire tech founder Nathaniel Cole being stopped and questioned by Regalis Airways staff despite having a valid first-class boarding pass. The chyron at the bottom of the screen blazed in red. #fly while black trends nationwide. "Turn that off," Charles snapped. The PR director fumbled with the remote, silencing the television. "This is a PR hiccup," Charles said, more to himself than the room. "We issue a statement, blame the employee, and move on. These things blow over in 24 hours. "Sir," said Teresa Williams, the chief communications officer, choosing her words carefully, "this isn't just trending, it's snowballing. Influential journalists are weighing in, civil rights groups are mobilizing. If we don't, we will not grovel," Charles interrupted. "Apologies make us look weak. Fire the employee if you have to, but keep it contained." Across the table, CFO Martin Reynolds cleared his throat. "The stock is already down 8% since market open," he said. "Our institutional investors are calling." "Then calm them," Charles barked, slamming his glass on the table. "This is optics, not operations." But even as he said it, his phone buzzed with a secure alert. His CTO's face appeared on the screen, pale and drawn. "Sir, we have a problem." "What now?" Charles demanded. "The booking system is glitching. Entire flights have disappeared from the database and our backups are failing. Customer service lines are overwhelmed. We're getting thousands of complaints." Charles rubbed his temples. "Fix it." "We're trying, sir, but..." The CTO hesitated. "This isn't random. It's targeted." Charles's blood ran cold. In a hotel suite across the country, Nathaniel sat before a wall of screens, the glow of cascading data reflecting in his dark, steady eyes. Leah Okoro stood at his shoulder, her presence a calm counterpoint to the storm unfolding on the screens. "Media engagement?" she asked. Nathaniel nodded. "It's time." A single keystroke sent a carefully crafted message out to every major news outlet. "This isn't about one lounge, one ticket, or one man. This is about a system that believes some people don't belong until someone makes them." The statement was signed simply, NC. Within minutes, anchors on CNN, MSNBC, and Bloomberg were reading it aloud. Social media exploded. The hashtag morphed from #FlyWhileBlack to #RegalisReckoning. In the Regalis employee break room, Sandra McKee scrolled through her phone, her face flushed with satisfaction as she saw her own name trending. "They're making me the villain now," she told the other agents with a self-righteous snort. "All because I followed procedure." "You went after him," Erica said quietly from across the room. Sandra looked up, annoyed. "Excuse me?" "Yay! You left your post to intercept him at the lounge," Erica said, her voice trembling but steady. "You humiliated him in front of everyone." "I was doing my job," Sandra shot back. "No," Erica said, standing now. "You were doing what you think your job is, keeping certain people out. You think no one notices, but we all do." The room fell silent. Several employees looked away. Sandra's smug expression faltered. Before she could respond, the door opened and their supervisor stepped in, his face grim. "Sandra, my office, now." That night, Regalis Airways crisis team worked through the small hours, but the news cycle had already turned brutal. Investigative journalists began digging into Regalis's past, unearthing lawsuits, harassment settlements, and a string of quietly resolved discrimination complaints. At midnight, a major bombshell dropped, leaked internal memos showing that Regalis management had knowingly suppressed safety concerns about its aging fleet to avoid costly maintenance delays. "Who leaked this?" Charles demanded, pacing his office like a caged animal. "We don't know," Martin replied, "but the authenticity checks out. The FAA is already calling for an emergency review." Charles's hands shook as he poured another drink. "Get me Ethan Ross," he ordered. Ethan Ross arrived 3 hours later. He was lean, sharp-eyed, dressed in a suit so precise it looked like it had been cut from shadow. Ethan was a man whose name was whispered in boardrooms when normal damage control had failed, a corporate fixer who specialized in intimidation, manipulation, and silence. "You're losing control of the narrative," Ethan said without preamble, dropping a folder on Charles's desk. "If you don't get ahead of this, Regalis won't survive the quarter." "Then fix it," Charles hissed. Ethan's cold smile barely touched his lips. "First, we identify the leaks, then we destroy their credibility, starting with Cole." "Good," Charles said, relief washing over him. "Finally, someone who understands." But across town in a dimly lit apartment, Jamal Barnes, the young intern who had witnessed everything, was typing frantically on his laptop, sending encrypted messages to a contact he had never met in person. Leah Okoro. "They're planning to scapegoat Victor Grant. They're saying he should have de-escalated with Cole. Suspension coming tomorrow." Within seconds, Leah's reply flashed across the screen. "Understood. We'll protect him. Stay safe. We may need you soon." Jamal leaned back, heart pounding. For the first time in his short career, he felt like his actions could change the outcome of something much bigger than himself. By dawn, the battle lines were drawn. Nathaniel wasn't just a humiliated passenger anymore. He was a man with an army of investigators, digital operatives, and allies inside the airline itself. And Regalis Airways wasn't just facing bad press. It was staring down a storm that would rip through its leadership, its finances, and its very survival. And the man at the center of it all was still calm, still waiting, because he hadn't even started yet. Ethan Ross had been awake for 36 hours straight, and he thrived on it. Crisis was his natural habitat, the place where he felt most alive. The Regalis crisis room hummed with activity, legal teams whispering, PR consultants drafting talking points, social media managers frantically deleting offensive posts from employees who had taken Sandra's side online. "Cole is winning the narrative war," Teresa Williams said, her tone clipped. "Every hour we delay, the public turns further against us." Ethan leaned back in his chair, perfectly calm, as if the chaos were a symphony, playing to his rhythm. "Then we change the story," he said. "How?" asked Martin Reynolds, the CFO. "By reminding the world that Cole isn't perfect." He slid a folder across the table. Inside were carefully compiled allegations, half-truths, and insinuations from Cole's past. An employee lawsuit settled quietly years ago, a questionable donation made to a political campaign, rumors of ruthless takeovers that left competitors gutted. "This will bury him," Ethan said with quiet satisfaction. Teresa hesitated. "Most of this is either resolved or disproven." "Truth is negotiable," Ethan replied coldly. "Perception is power." Within hours, a story appeared on a fringe news site. Billionaire tech CEO accused of financial fraud and toxic workplace culture. Anonymous sources were quoted, the timing conveniently coinciding with Nathaniel's public statement about systemic discrimination. But Nathaniel was already waiting for it. At Cole Dynamics' secure war room, Leah Okoro watched the smear attempt go live and smiled grimly. "They just took the bait." "Activate mirror protocol," Nathaniel said calmly. A series of keystrokes triggered the next phase of their plan. Within minutes, the same fringe news site posted a sudden retraction, along with leaked emails showing that the entire story had been paid for by Regalis' crisis team. Social media exploded with the revelation. Hashtag Regalis cover-up trended even faster than the original scandal. Reporters who had hesitated to take sides now smelled blood. At Regalis headquarters, Charles Whitmore slammed his fist on the table. "How did this backfire so fast?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "Cole has someone feeding him our moves before we make them. He's inside the house." "You said you could contain this," Charles roared. "I can," Ethan said evenly, his eyes narrowing. "But not with half measures. We need to go nuclear, lock down employee communications, suspend anyone even suspected of leaking, and prepare to cut loose anyone who can't be controlled." "You mean fire them?" Teresa asked Ishal sharply. "Fire them, destroy them. Whatever it takes," Ethan replied. "This is survival." But outside the boardroom, employees were already whispering. Suspensions were announced. Victor Grant's name appeared on the internal bulletin as relieved pending investigation. Jamal's phone buzzed with a single message from Leah. "Hold your ground. Help is coming." That night, Nathaniel made his first public appearance since the lounge incident. A press conference was held at a San Francisco hotel, the room filled with reporters hungry for the next headline. Nathaniel stepped to the podium in a charcoal suit, his presence commanding, his expression calm, but edged with quiet fire. "What happened to me at Regalis Airways is not unique," he began, his voice measured, carrying to the back of the room. "It happens every day to people who don't have the privilege of cameras or influence or a platform. This is not just about one man denied entry to a lounge. It's about systems that decide who belongs and who does not." He paused, letting the words settle, then dropped the bombshell. "Tonight, my legal team has filed a formal complaint against Regalis Airways for discrimination, harassment, and violation of federal transportation equality statutes. But that is only the beginning. Over the next 48 hours, we will release evidence of systemic misconduct, financial fraud, safety violations, and internal policies that target specific groups of passengers. We will not just seek accountability, we will create it." The room erupted with shouted questions. Nathaniel stepped back from the microphone, signaling that there would be no QA. The message had been delivered. At Regalis HQ, the boardroom was in chaos. Half the directors were shouting, demanding Charles' resignation, while the other half argued for a legal counteroffensive. "This company is hemorrhaging value," William Freeman, a senior board member, shouted. "Our stock has lost 20% in 3 days. We're one cycle away from bankruptcy." "Cole is trying to buy us cheap," Charles snarled. "He wants to humiliate us and take everything we've built." "Maybe he's trying to save what's left," Freeman shot back. "You've turned this company into a liability." Ethan stood in the corner, arms folded, his mind already working through contingencies. "We still have leverage," he said quietly, "but we have to act fast before the market opens tomorrow." "Do whatever you have to do," Charles said, his voice cold. "I am not handing my company over to him." But by morning, the headlines were worse. SEC launches formal investigation into Regalis Airways. FAA orders emergency inspection of entire Regalis fleet. Whistleblowers come forward, confirm discrimination claims. On CNBC, a panel of analysts openly speculated that Regalis might not survive the week. And in a glass-walled office high above San Francisco, Nathaniel Cole stood before a floor-to-ceiling smart wall filled with interconnected data points. Regalis's corporate structure, its hidden accounts, its buried complaints. "It's time," he said quietly. Leah nodded. "Phase 3? Phase 3, Nathaniel confirmed. "Bring the board to its knees and leave Charles Whitmore with no place to hide." Rain lashed against the windows of Cole Dynamics' executive floor as the war room glowed with blue light from its wall of data screens. Every node, every line, every connection had been mapped, the anatomy of a dying empire laid bare. Nathaniel Cole stood at the center of it all, calm and unreadable, a man who had spent his life learning patience, now standing at the edge of victory. "Board meeting is confirmed for 9 a.m., Leah reported, her tone sharp with anticipation. "They're desperate. Whitmore will be there in person. Ethan Ross, too." "Good," Nathaniel said. His gaze remained fixed on the glowing network diagram where Charles Whitmore, his name pulsed like a dying star at the center of the corruption web. "Media?" Leah asked. "Primed," Nathaniel replied. "They'll have front row seats." At Regalis Airways headquarters, Charles Whitmore strode into the boardroom like a man walking to the gallows. His suit was perfect, his hair immaculate, but the strain showed in his clenched jaw and the hollows beneath his eyes. Ethan Ross followed close behind, tablet in hand, ready to deliver one last act of defiance. The board members were already seated, their faces grim. The mood was electric, dangerous. "Let's get this over with," Charles said, throwing himself into the chair at the head of the table. "Cole's circus ends today." But before he could speak further, the massive screen at the end of the room flickered to life. Nathaniel's face appeared, perfectly composed, backlit by the glow of the San Francisco skyline. "Good morning, Charles," Nathaniel said, his tone polite but edged with steel. "Board members, thank you for allowing me to join." "This is highly irregular," Charles snapped. "So is systemic fraud," Nathaniel countered without missing a beat. He tapped something off-screen, and the boardroom display transformed into a cascading stream of evidence. Emails bearing Charles's signature, hidden ledgers, whistleblower testimony, even recorded calls connecting Whitmore to FAA inspectors he had bribed to look the other way. "Stop this!" Charles shouted, rising from his seat. But the board wasn't looking at him anymore. They were staring at the screen, at the proof of what they had suspected, but never dared confirm. "You falsified maintenance records," said William Freeman, voice shaking with barely restrained fury. "You put lives at risk." "This is a hack job," Charles roared. "Illegally obtained data, doctored evidence. Digital forensics has already verified its authenticity," Nathaniel cut in smoothly. And as of 5 minutes ago, the SEC has received the full file. You can deny it to this board, Charles, but you won't deny it to federal prosecutors. Ethan Ross leaned toward Charles, his face pale for the first time. We need to walk out of here, now. No, Charles hissed. I built this company, they can't. But he was interrupted by the board chair's voice, cold and final. Charles Whitmore, this board is voting on your immediate termination, effective now. The vote was swift. 12 hands raised, 3 abstained, 0 opposed. You can't do this, Charles shouted as security entered the room. You think Cole will save you? He'll gut this company and sell it for parts. Nathaniel's voice came through the speakers one last time, calm and measured. On the contrary, I'll save what's worth saving. The employees, the passengers, the promise of what Regalis was supposed to be. But what I will not save, Charles, is you. 2 federal agents entered, badges flashing. Charles Whitmore, one said, you're under arrest for wire fraud, obstruction, and falsification of safety records. The boardroom fell silent as Charles was handcuffed and escorted out. Ethan Ross followed, his expression unreadable, the look of a man calculating his next move even as the empire around him burned. 2 weeks later, Washington National Airport was unrecognizable. Reporters crowded the tarmac, cameras flashing as the newly rebranded Cole Air unveiled its first jet. The logo was bold, elegant, a fusion of wings and circuitry, symbolizing both flight and the technology that powered it. Nathaniel stepped to the podium, the very place where he had been humiliated months earlier. His voice carried over the crowd, steady and resonant. Not long ago, I stood in this very airport and was told, but in 100 subtle ways, that I didn't belong, he began. Today, we begin a new chapter. One where every passenger, every employee, every human being who steps on one of our planes knows they are valued, respected, and safe. Applause broke out. Cameras zoomed in on Jamal Barnes, standing proudly in the front row, now a management trainee at Cole Dynamics. Erica was there too, wearing her new badge as head of the Passenger Experience Equality Division. And behind them, Victor Grant, reinstated and promoted to Director of Security Operations, stood tall, his posture a quiet statement that justice had prevailed. As the cameras rolled, Nathaniel's voice grew more personal. When I was a boy, I sat on the steps of a foster home and filled notebooks with equations, trying to predict patterns to stop bad things before they happened. I believed if I could see the storm coming, I could protect myself. Today, I don't just see the storm, I am the storm, but one that clears the air so we can all breathe. The crowd rose to its feet, applause rolling like thunder. Later that night, Nathaniel stood alone in his office, looking out over the San Francisco skyline. Leah entered quietly, holding a glass of champagne. It's done, she said simply. No, Nathaniel replied, turning to face her with the faintest of smiles. It's just beginning. He raised the glass. To building something better. Leah clinked her glass against his. To building something that lasts. And somewhere in a federal holding cell, Charles Whitmore sat alone, staring at the wall, replaying Nathaniel's words. You're not just fighting me, you're fighting the future. For the first time, Charles understood what that meant.